All right, it's been a minute. We haven't been on the channel in a while. Welcome to this episode of the Edge Whitetails. We're talking all about what we have here in our hand, the shed antler. It's getting to be that time. Today is February 22nd. We're here with Bremer County Conservation. Stay tuned. Okay, so welcome back to the Edge Whitetails, and everybody you just saw there is here for our class today, the shed antler. How many of you all have been shed antler hunting before? Ooh, we got a fair amount of hands. Okay, who has been shed hunting this year? Ooh, we got more hands. We got two. All right, who has found a shed antler before? Okay, we do have some that are veterans, so to speak. Okay, well that's good. That's good. My name is Eric Johnston, and as I said, I write for a couple papers here locally, the Reedland Chronicle and a paper in Waterloo called the Cedar Valley Saber. And I also have a YouTube channel with my daughter Delana, and we call it the Edge Whitetails, a blend of our initials. And we do everything whitetail. From hunting all the way through the year and everything that goes on with whitetail deer. So if you're interested, check us out on YouTube. Just hit the search bar, the Edge Whitetails, and you can see everything we got there. So that being said, I'm glad you all made it out today. We're partnered with Bremer County Conservation today. Angie Ault is our Bremer County naturalist. And we have put this together, and I'm glad that the participation is filled up way faster than I ever thought it would. So, the antler. This deal right here rules a better part of my life. I'm beyond unhealthily obsessed with the whitetail deer and their antlers. If you don't believe me, you can ask my wife. It's an unhealthy obsession, but it's an obsession that I love to pass along with folks, hence the YouTube channel, writing articles, and Angie knows me pretty well these days. We coach archery together, and everything outdoors I just Google over. So we are going to move into the different types of antlers. Elk have antlers, mule deer have antlers, moose, they shed their antlers each year. Even antelope, caribou. Who's all seen caribou before? Raised hands. Yep. And they will all grow in different shapes and sizes throughout all the different animals, okay? And today we're going to focus mostly on the whitetail deer. Everything antlers can be very abnormal, like you see there with that buck, and very, very abnormal with that buck. Now this buck right here would most likely be what you would see in a pen-raised environment. That wouldn't be a natural thing. Well, the Carlsons are showing. Okay. But that would be what you call a non-typical whitetail. Doesn't have a typical rack. This would be, like here, would be a typical whitetail. That was how that would be scored, and that would be a non-typical whitetail. And as you can see, there's another example of just how different and wild each antler can grow. So, talking on the antlers, there is, each different part of the antler, and it starts at the pedicle, and this is a big focus on our antler hunting today, the pedicle. That's where everything starts with the antler. That's where it starts to grow, and that's where it eventually through the season falls off. So you have the pedicle, and what it looks like on a shed antler is this guy right here, and you can see all the little cavities in it, and I'll pass that around. If you look at the bottom, all the little cavities, and those were once blood vessels traveling through that antler as it grew over the summer. Go ahead and pass that around, and that is what a pedicle is going to look like after it falls off naturally off a deer. Then, as you go through going up the antler, you have each point, and it starts at the burr, and it grows from there. And in whitetail deer scoring, this would be your G1, G2, G3, and your main beam going throughout. Main beam is where everything comes off of, and that's what I talk about with G1, G2, G3. That's all like a scoring model, like clubs like Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett. That is how they score whitetail deer after they've been harvested, and that is how they come up with the numbers of what a deer is or is not after they've been taken. As you can see in the picture there, G1, G2, G3, and then the main beam. And in scoring, each of that is measured, and basically what they come up with is a total amount of mass of the antler on each side plus the spread. But the scoring part of it is not really why we're here today, but as I said, I'm obsessed with antlers. So now, how fast does an antler grow? Does anybody know how fast an antler will grow? Does anybody have an idea? How fast do you think an antler will grow, Noah?
9 months.
Okay, that's a good analogy of how long it takes, but how much do you think it grows each day? How much?
Couple millimeters.
Couple millimeters? What do you think, buddy?
2 centimeters.
2 centimeters? Let's talk in inches. Let's go by, how much do you think that converts to in inches? Like half an inch?
3/4 of an inch.
You think 3/4? Okay, what do you think, Porter? You think an inch a day, huh? What do you think, bud? Half an inch? Okay, that's some good guesses. Deer antlers will grow up to 1/4 of an inch per day, which to me, I know you guys had some random guesses, and to me, that's extremely fast. It's actually one of the fastest growing bone tissues in the animal kingdom, which to me is crazy and honestly downright magical to me how fast they grow. Quite a deal. Now, what time of year do you guys think they start growing? Right here in the brown coat.
Start of the winter season.
No. What about you back there, Parker?
March.
Not quite March. Right here in the Broncos.
Winter.
About the 1st of April, we will start see them start to grow. A lot of times I'll be turkey hunting about mid-April, and you'll already see nubs coming off of their heads. It does not take long after they shed to start growing. Now, there's a lot of factors that contribute to an antler growth. From everything, there's factors that can make them this big, which is very small, all the way up to some of the larger antlers I've found or seen over the years. And those factors are, one, the first and foremost is the age. That should have been higher on my list above nutrition. Age is the biggest factor. In the start of a whitetail's life, they're gonna, like a buck's first year, he was born in, let's say, early June, late May, early June. And that first year, he's gonna be considered what we would call a button buck. And the reason we call him a button buck is they'll have a button, their pedicle will just form a little button, and that's all it's gonna be that year. Sometimes there'll be a little spike, but that first year, that is all it's gonna be. So age is a big factor in antler growth. Nutrition is another big part. If they have a lot of stress through the winter, predators such as coyotes in the north woods, wolves, tough winter, cold temperatures, that adds a lot of stress. Lately we've had wind chills down to -20. That'll add a lot of stress to a whitetail in the wintertime. Now you would think that's not when they're growing. Why would that add stress to how they grow in the summertime? Everything for that next year comes off of how much stress they went through this winter. We here in Northeast Iowa have actually had a mild winter. This last week has been typical of how cold it can be, but we've actually had a mild winter this year, and the deer have not had a ton of stress on them. If a deer is super run down as he goes into the spring, his antler development that following fall is going to be very, very affected by how bad he was coming off of the spring. Because as an animal, even us humans, takes in nutrition, God has a weird way of moving stuff around. That nutrition focuses on what is needed to survive first. Antlers aren't needed to survive, therefore the nutrition is going into their body, building their body up, and if you have a rough winter, odds are that next year, antler development is not going to be that big. This past fall, we had some of the biggest, like in the property I hunt, through a lot of scouting and a lot of trail cam monitoring, in the property I hunt, we had the biggest antler growth and the biggest jumps among our deer that we've had in like 4 or 5 years. Why do you think maybe that would be? Noah?
They are getting older and there's less stress on them.
That's a good point. They are getting older in our hunting property. Parker, what do you think?
They're not taking that much stress throughout the winter.
That's almost there. The last winter, the year before, we had one of the mildest winters we've had in a long time. They went into the spring super healthy. They didn't have a ton of stress over the winter because it was so mild, and they started their antler development super early. We also had a lot of vegetation growing early, and they got more nutrition right away, as opposed to hard winters where we don't have any vegetation until May. A lot of deer's diet is by browse and the vegetation, and we had, which brings me into habitat, we had a great year last year as far as antler development because of that early spring. Habitat is another big deal in their growth. And a lot of people think when it comes to a deer's diet, the cornfield, those of us that hunt or manage a property, food plots we plant, that's actually not the biggest part of a whitetail buck's diet. A whitetail buck's diet is 90% the browse in the environment he lives in. Twigs, underbrush, leaves, you wouldn't think that would be such a big factor, but it's the factor. Great habitat, like our conservation department does, our state of Iowa does, is the key factor in growing, nutrition-wise, growing big antlers. Our state of Iowa is probably the best in the country, right up there. I'm biased, I think it's the best in the country for whitetail management. From how they do their tags to how they manage their public lands and the habitat. We are fortunate enough to live in the best state in the United States for whitetail deer hunting. The other factor, genetics. Much like I grew up a small guy, and my buddy growing up is now 7 foot tall. The reason being is I came from a family of short people, he came from a family of tall people. Well, whitetail deer are no different. Their genetics are predetermined by their parents. The doe is a big factor in that. Antler size is actually transmitted to that button buck by his mom more than it is the dad on the genetics. If you have a good doe population that they were born from bucks with giant antlers, their button bucks are more likely to have big antlers than others in the herd. So genetics are a big factor on that too. So we went nutrition, age, genetics, hormones. Hormones are a big part in antler growth as well, and it is all determined by the amount of daylight we have throughout the year, which is called photoperiodism. Now, photoperiodism, like I said, the amount of daylight each day, triggers the hormones in a whitetail buck on when to grow his antlers and when the body sheds the antlers. Most everything in the wild, not just deer, is all run off of photoperiodism. Layman's terms, the amount of daylight we have. That is what tells the animals what the season is, and a lot of that goes hand in hand with how this goes. Now, weather can factor things, like I said, stress on them in the wintertime, stuff like that. Weather can have small factors, but it only changes things by like a week or two, typically. So, we're going to take you through now the growth process in the spring. Like I said, typically around the 1st of April, antlers begin to sprout from the pedicles. Who out there can tell me what the pedicle is again? Noah?
Isn't it part where the antler comes from?
Yes. Parker?
The base.
Yes. Like I said, actually the Carlsons were just a touch late. The pedicle is once again right here, and this is all the little dimples are the blood vessels that traveled up through it, and that is where the antlers start from. Now, as they grow through the year, they have what we call velvet on their antlers, as you can see right up there, and they'll grow. As they grow, it's nubs, and then as they get more through the process, it sharpens out. And as you can see there, there's another example of the velvet. It's very fuzzy, and it's like a skin layer on top of what will eventually be the bone density type material. So, during peak growth, we talked about 1/4 inch a day. This is also like if you go through a typical week, 3/4 of an inch per week for yearlings and 1.5 inches per week for adults. Which leads to the 1/4 inch a day on a bigger buck such as this. That's how fast it's going to grow. This little guy, you know, he's making his way, but it's not gonna. He doesn't need to grow them as fast. And then we get through the summer. They feed on all the great clover and all the browse and habitat, and they have just a plethora of food throughout the summer as they grow. In late August, the blood flow quits. Like I said, through the pedicles, this starts to shut off. And that triggers the velvet. The velvet starts to die. And they will actually start rubbing on trees, and that's how they get rid of the velvet. They're going to rub, it's going to work that away. They will even have blood on their antlers. And that ends the process of the growth, and it's all hardening underneath now. And like I said, they're going to start rubbing. As you can see there, there's little pieces yet coming off, and they'll rub until that's all gone. And then there's the finished product. There is a classic example of a late October whitetail. Everything's hardened. He hasn't really gotten into what we call the rut yet, the breeding phase. So he's not busted up yet. He hasn't been fighting. He's a finely tuned whitetail deer that is ready to go into the process of reproducing throughout the fall. Late October is the time frame that they really start beefing up for. You'll see their necks swell, and they utilize their antlers as a basically pecking order fighting type device. This is, you know, the deal about photoperiodism again, changing amount of daylight that triggers the breeding season for whitetail deer. This annual change in photoperiod in the fall is the primary trigger for the rut. Now, I just said it, but who can tell me what the rut is? Anybody? Anybody? Parker's back there. What do you got?
Like the beginning part?
What's that? No, this is a season, basically. The rut is when Eric takes his vacation from work. What do we got? Yeah.
The buck chasing the doe, is it a doe?
Yep, it starts the whole breeding process. Good deal, good deal. Starts the whole breeding process to reproduce, and that's what this is all about as far as their antlers and pecking order and the whole part. The photoperiodism, like I said, it regulates the antler growth and it triggers the breeding season. Now I said weather can factor into this, but it only changes things by a week or two. The photoperiodism is the end-all be-all of everything, because if the does are bred in too late, they're going to have their fawns too late, and they're not going to survive that next fall. Like I said, Ma Nature has a way of making sure everything happens when it's supposed to. Weather's only going to affect everything by a week or so. So the photoperiodism also works in the does as far as their hormones. That's what tells them it's time to go, and that's the whole process here. The ruts. Testosterone is at its highest levels. The bucks no longer like each other. They are the bullies of the schoolyard. They want to fight every other buck and everything that moves in claiming their girlfriend, basically. So it's a struggle. And there's lots of fighting that goes on throughout the whitetail woods in late October and November. That is the time frame. And when I say busted up, they will actually go as far as it'll break tines off. I've seen deer in the wild that have a whole antler broke off, the whole deal. They do not mess around.
They're not very smart either, and will get tangled up in fences.
Right. The rut makes the whitetail buck that is so elusive through 90% of the year. The rut is when he is going to slip up. That's a great point to bring up, Angie. Yes.
One time I saw a deer get like stuck in a fence, like barbed wire kind of.
Did he have his back leg wrapped up in the top?
No, it was like his antlers got stuck in it.
Oh, really?
Called the DNR, and his back legs were like, they weren't working, he got tied up. And
Oh no, that's the kind of stuff. Yeah, they get so focused on finding their girlfriend, the doe, that they have trouble remembering how elusive they are, to put it mildly. So now we're getting to where the reason why we're all here. The photoperiodism, as we go through the fall, it also, the does come out of heat now, and they're going back to their normal just bed to feed type areas, and the bucks no longer are chasing them. The bucks will actually group back up together now. They spend their entire summer as they grow their antlers all together. We call them bachelor groups. And the only time they disperse from each other is in the fall, when they decide that they don't like each other anymore. As the daylight, photoperiodism, settles their hormones down and their testosterone begins to fall again, they will group back up. Now, as we go this time of year especially, my trail cams show it every day now. Every day I have another buck on the trail cam that has lost his antlers. What happens is, with the photoperiodism, it's lowering the testosterone now where it raised it before. And when the testosterone gets lowered and winter starts to take a toll on a whitetail deer's body, once again, Ma Nature has a way of taking care of things. It decides that the buck doesn't need to carry those antlers around no more. And it goes into survival mode, and that is when the skin here begins to, what was so strong that held this here, there's a membrane there right by the pedicle that deteriorates now because it's not being fed by the body. The testosterone has went away. That membrane deteriorates and the antler falls off. that is how the whole process works. And that membrane is, I can't believe scientists haven't like figured out a way to utilize this in other processes, because that membrane is so strong for what it is. It's like an 1/8 inch thick, and it is some of the strongest material. But that's another seminar. But they, like I said, the photoperiodism, now that membrane deteriorates away from the pedicle, antler drops off. Every bit of nutrition then in that point goes to survival for the white-tailed deer. Like I talked about earlier, this is the time he needs to get back to feeding and keep himself in good condition, and then we start the whole process over again. So, key points about deer shedding antlers. The hormones, the primary factor is the decline in the testosterone after the rutting season, mating period. Bone cell activity. This is what I'm talking about with that membrane. It's a specialized bone cells called, and I'm going to butcher this, osteoclasts, break down the bone tissue at the base of the antler, causing it to detach. So that's that membrane I'm talking about. Yes?
When one detaches, does the other detach pretty close to it, or does it not matter at all?
Very similar. They will fall, typically they will fall off about the same time. But I've found over the years, I had one particular buck this season actually, that he lost his right side in late December, and he carried his left side around till about 2 weeks ago. So it was odd. Typically you will find, like if I find like this set right here, we found the one side along a south-facing slope, and the other side was about 45 yards away from it. And typically, especially on the bigger deer, they will fall off about the same time. Now that's not always tried and true. I have another buck right now that I really want to find his antlers this year in our property. He dropped one that I can tell on the trail cameras all the way up on the west end of the farm, and from what I can gather, when he dropped the other one, he was on the very east end of the farm about 700 yards away. So they can be quite a distance, or you can find them laying, I found them laying side by side. This set, she's got the other side to it. My dad and I found together they were laying exactly like this. Like he had been in his bed and they just went boop, like that. Because we were both just, it was the end of the day, and we were both just walking out the end of this ridge, and Dad goes, well, look at that. And they were right there together. So that's how easy it can be sometimes. And sometimes it can be so frustrating, especially when you're after one particular animal, to find his antlers. But the seasonal cycle, like I said, antlers typically shed in late winter, early spring, regrow throughout the summer. By shedding antlers, bucks reduce the weight they carry during the winter when food is less available. All right, now we're getting to the reason you're all here. Time to hunt. I want to talk now about how we're going to hunt, okay? This was one I actually found a couple years ago. It was pretty cool. It was in a bedding area, and we're going to talk about that now. Where do I start? We have this whole vast woods out here, and what we want to do is we don't want it to be so much a needle in a haystack. We want to give ourselves the best percentage area, the high percentage areas, because we all lead busy lives and we want to utilize our time, right? So many of us only have an hour or two to get out, and we want to look at those high percentage areas where deer spend most of their time throughout the day. So as you can see right there, that is a classic example of a very heavy deer trail. That is definitely one place to start that you can follow along. And what I like to do on a deer trail is 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be laying right on the trail. If you think about it, a big buck's going down that trail, and which way is the antler going to fall if it falls off? It's not going to be right in front of his face, right? Which way do you think it's going to go?
It depends on which way.
It's probably just going to fall right off on the side of the trail, right?
Yeah.
So we would typically want to look, as we go down the trail, we're going to look straight in front of us, but we're also going to go off to each side, right? One thing I like to do when I'm following deer trails and looking is to walk straight down the trail and just scan to each side. Fence crossings. The reason I like fence crossings is you can cover a lot of area in a hurry, and you can go right down the fence line because what's that deer doing right there? What's going to happen when he hits the ground? That force, good job guys, that force, he's going to hit that ground and it's going to jar his head a little bit, ever so little bit. Like think about when you jump, you come back down, everything kind of moves, right? Well, sometimes that can knock that membrane loose and drop them off. So fence crossings are a real easy way to start, and a lot of times the way I'll cover those is I have the luxury of having a Polaris Ranger, or if you have a four-wheeler, heck, if it's a flat enough field, you take your bicycle down along it if there's not enough snow. You can cover a lot of ground by just running down the edge of the field along the fence line, and every time you see a trail, slow down, take a look around it a little bit, see if something got jarred loose, move on to the next. Bedding areas. That's a big one right there, the bedding area. Now, as you walk through the woods, a bedding area is going to typically be your thicker part of the timber. Weeds growing up, trees that have fallen over. Think about where, if you were a deer, where you'd like to lay to have the most cover, like the wind blocking you, the snow, the snow getting blocked, a warm area where they can tuck up by a log and the sun's beating down on that log and warming that log. Think about where they would be comfortable throughout the day, because a deer will bed most of the day. They'll get up and move around, but then they'll lay back down. Now, like I said, we want to shed hunt where, anybody? We want to shed hunt where they spend most of their time. A deer's going to spend 90% of the 24 hours laying in that bed. He's going to get up and browse a little bit, but then he's going to lay right back down. That's where he's safe. That's where he's comfortable. A lot of times their bedding area is where they have a setup where they can scan everything downwind, and the wind's at their back, depending on which way it's blowing that day. And the wind is going to blow right over them, and they can smell anything that's coming from the upwind side. It's typically how a whitetail buck is going to bed. He's usually going to be able to bed up where he can see a long distance, see danger coming, and he can smell anything that's coming from his backside by playing the wind. That's one good thing to keep in mind as you're shed hunting. If you're in hilly country like we are here, south-facing slopes where that sun's beating down, a lot of times they're going to spend their time there because it's warmer, and typically in the winter time we have north or northwest winds. So they can lay on that south-facing slope, they can look a long ways, and they've got the wind coming over top. That's our target right there. Now, a lot of the deer in this country right here that we noticed today, right, Angie?
Right.
You're not probably going to be looking for something this big. This is going to stick out like a sore thumb, okay? You're not going to have much trouble finding something like this. You really want to focus and lock in and get your eyes trained on something that small, okay? Because if you think small and look small, you'll have no problem finding the big ones, okay? So you're going to want to think about, you're looking for something this size, okay? I was telling Angie earlier that when I was in high school, many, many years ago, I actually found, and I was not a good shed hunter by any means at this time. I was still learning this all by, the school of hard knocks. I actually found a button off of a button buck, and I tried so hard to find it in my attic this week, and I could not find it. So I'm still not a good shed hunter then. But I wanted so badly to bring that button and show you all, but we didn't have it. So, and this antler right here, just a quick little story. This is actually the deer I was talking about that dropped his antlers this year, 700 yards apart. This was 3 years ago, and I found both sides of his rack, and he is now 100 and almost 70-inch deer, and he has grown into something very, very big. And we call him Split G2 because his G2 here, to this day, he still carries that on both sides. It matches perfectly. And he's the one that is kind of my frustration because he's now dropped them apart, and he's the buck I hunt each fall the last 2 years. He's almost 170 inches now, and this was 3 years ago when he was still like a $120 and he was like 2 years old. He's a 6-year-old now, and I will be spending, after our classroom session today and hunting, this, usually the 22nd of February, thereabouts, kicks off my shed season, and then I will hunt till about April now throughout our property. But that is kind of a cool story. I found that side right there, and one of the older couples that lives on the farm where we're at, she had never been shed hunting before, and she's nearly 80 years old. And I said, hop in my Ranger, we're gonna go shed hunting today, Wilda. Her name's Wilda, and she carries that personality. She was named Perfect when she was little. I said, hop in my Ranger, we're gonna go shed hunting. She bundled up, and you wanna see an old lady excited. She found the other side, I went the wrong way. She found the other side of that, and we had a match set, and we took a picture together, and we put it in the newspaper and the whole works, because she was excited. If you want to hear an old lady cuss, she said, holy, you could hear, I was 30 yards away from her, and you could hear her, so. On your map, Angie has done us the pleasure of highlighting kind of our area that we're going to hunt. Now, I want you all to recognize that north, which way that's pointing, is that way, so you got to look at our map. We're in the building here where the yellow starts. Okay, so we need to kind of look at our map this way. And where we've got it labeled cornfield, that is not actually a cornfield, but it's an open area, so today that is our cornfield, okay? And everything in this highlighted area that starts right out here, and it goes, we'll get you started on this trail, and it goes that way, and it works around, there's some houses over here, and you'll work your way around by the houses. I want you to all to remember that a cornfield is a very good place to look. That is where I start each year. Like I said when I was looking on the fence lines, I will start actually driving back and forth on the cornfield with my Ranger, scanning out both sides. A lot of times I'll have my daughter looking out one side, I'll look out the other, and we find a lot of them in the middle of the fields. Cornfields are really hard to spot them because what color is this? What color is a corn stalk? When Angie and I were walking earlier, I freaked out twice in the woods and it was a blown-in corn stalk. So it gets very difficult in the fields. Like I said, fence crossings are a good way to go. Trails, like I said, we're going to walk along the trail and you're going to look off both sides. Bedding areas is the key. I'll throw a percentage out there, but I'm going to say 70% of the sheds I find are in beds. Just because typically the deer spend most of their day there. This is what a bedding area looks like in our current environment right now. I do know there's a bunch out there. Angie and I took a walk. There's beds. Lots of beds. So remember this when we get out there, okay? We're really close to getting out there. I know you're all getting bored with classroom stuff. We don't have a creek here today. We're not going that far. We have a river to the west, but we're not going that far. But much like a fence line, I just want to, before we end the classroom discussion, creek crossings are a very good place to look as well. The first shed I ever found in my shed hunting career, I think I was, doesn't matter, 13, 14 years old. And I rode my bike down to this public hunting area down. I grew up around Delhi. And I was looking and looking and looking, and I come up this creek embankment, and there was a deer trail coming up. It was really steep. And I poked up over the top of where I could come up out of that creek, and there was an antler laying right there. It was my first one, and I I'm sure everybody in Delhi, even though I was 2 miles away, could hear me. I ran right in the house, showing it to my mom, putting it right in her face. She wasn't all that impressed. The reason creek crossings are good is because most of the time, much like a fence line jumping, most of the time on a creek crossing, it's steep. And it's going into that creek basin. The footing is uneasy, and they can jar and move just right and knock their antlers off that way too. So, that is our classroom session. Do any of y'all, before we make our way outside, do any of y'all have any questions? Yes?
Is there a limit to how many you can like get?
Yes. So, hold on a second, guys. Have a seat yet. We're going to go over some rules here. When you find your antler, if you find one, then you're done picking up antlers, but you still get to hunt. You get to help your fellow students here find their antler, okay? Does that all sound good?
And we have 28, including adults, so even the adults.
Yes, yes. And we encourage the adults to help, because we want to make sure if we leave a couple out there, that's okay, but we want to make sure that we find all the antlers that the deer in this area have dropped, right, Angie?
That's right.
Bentley? Yep, you all will take an antler home today.
And so the
Hold on.
trail that we're going to be walking around, they do groom for fat tire bikes. So I would ask you not to walk on the actual trail, but walk off on the side.
Just to the side of it.
Just because with 28 of us, well, with Eric and I, 30 of us walking on that trail, and we have a lot of bikers using the trails today, and they're not going to be very happy with us if we ruin their trail. So just walk off on the sides. We can, of course, walk on them to cross and things like that, but just be aware where your feet are and just stay on the snow.
Noah, you had a question.
Isn't that to keep track of how many deer you guys have around here?
Oh, good point. Good point. The reason, there's a lot of different reasons for shed hunting. He brings me to a good point here. There's a lot of different reasons for shed hunting. Me personally, I love to shed hunt. I don't really have any interest in going out just to random places anymore and shed hunting on a deer that I don't know or know per se. What I like to do, hold on, we'll get to you, okay? What I like to do is follow a deer through the years. I like to find them from this and follow them all the way up. That way, if I'm fortunate enough to harvest them eventually, I have this whole storyline built up. And I mean, now I have the YouTube channel and we film every hunt my daughter and I have. So we have that documentation, plus if we have their antlers, we get quite the intimate relationship with each and every deer that we hunt now. So my daughter is on the channel and she nicknames a lot of our deer. She has one that she's after called Moose, just because he has such a weird abnormal rack. And he's the one that actually dropped one side in late December and dropped the other side like 2 weeks ago. So my daughter's ready to go find his rack. So that, you know, this was a buck here. This was probably one of the biggest sets that I've ever found. And like I said, on this deal, I had found one side, my dad had found the other. I don't know if I even told the story on this, but they were about 45 yards apart. I found one side, Dad found the other, and this was a buck that we called Niner. The only reason I honestly, guys, when I talk about nicknames for deer, it kind of makes me like, I don't want to sound outdoor channel. I honestly kind of like, ugh. I really don't like it, but we found over the years that when I'm talking to my dad or my daughter, we know exactly what deer we're talking about at the moment. It just makes it easier, because otherwise, these outdoor channel shows where they're like, yeah, I saw Fred tonight, but I let him walk, and I don't like that. We typically try and have names that it was just a characteristic of their rack. We called this guy Niner because that was all he ever drew for a knife point. He was always just a mainframe 8, and he always had this tiny little sticker, and he made it to, this was his 5-year-old rack, and we never saw him after this. This was the last year. But while he wasn't the biggest deer any of us have ever harvested, he always kind of gave us the slip, which he became kind of mystical. And this was probably 15 years ago, so he was like one of the first storylines of following through the years. Yes, buddy.
If you were to like hunt and kill a deer, like hang on your wall or whatever, I see a lot of them that still have like antlers on there. Wouldn't they just like over the years like fall off? So they're not,
Great point. If you harvest a deer in the fall and there's no hormones or blood pushing to that osteoclast, that's what it was. It just hardens, and that all hardens together and stays there. It's such a weird, mystical, I hate to use the term magical, mystical, but there's a lot scientists don't know about antler growth and everything. It's still something that's always studied, and I think that's why I've become so obsessed with it. That actually hardens and it locks. So when a deer is mounted on the wall, they cut it right off of the base of the skull. They just cap it basically, and there's still a little bit of bone there, and then that's what goes on the foam that the hide is around. The hide is actually around all the foam. It's just foam under there. Yep. What's your question? Mm-hmm. You saw deer tracks?
Yeah.
Perfect. That's what you want to look for to find the antlers, okay?
Yeah, we can follow the tracks.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, I think if anybody needs to use the bathroom, we'll do that. We'll meet you outside and we'll get going.
I did fall.
All right, so as you can see, we have quite a group here, and we're starting our actual shed hunt part of it. Those of you that have been watching the classroom version, thank you. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit subscribe to the Edge Whitetails. We're going to film some of these guys and gals finding some antlers. We got a big group going through the woods today. No antlers safe. You guys can all start kind of looking through here, and there's beds, like we talked about.
I found deer poop.
You found deer poop? Anybody find an antler yet? Oh, look at that. Show me your antler, buddy. Nice work. Nice work. You got one?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to help everybody else look. There might only be a couple in this spot. You find one? This is Sam. What do you think, kiddo?
It's cool.
Sweet. She got right on that one. Yeah. We know, if I remember correctly, we noticed a lot of deer dropping them on that back trail, right? Yeah. All right, so we're finishing up here. That's Angie in the background, and Bremer County Conservation Naturalist Angie All. We had a very successful hunt. I'm going to flip the camera here, and I'm going to ask all these shed hunters about their. All right, gang. What do y'all think of shed hunting? Y'all got some antlers, huh?
I love it. It's outstanding.
Very, very nice. Everybody had a good day at Camp Iguanas. And we'll wrap this video up. I'm going to get a picture of these guys, but thanks for tuning into the Edge Whitetails. Look for us another episode in about a week, as I'll be doing a bunch of shed hunting myself. And until next time, Everybody, and I want you to say, get outdoors. 1, 2, 3.
Get outdoors!
Good job.